This is Module 1, the Doctrine of Discovery. My name is Michelle Thomas, and I am the Indigenous Cultural Safety Coordinator at Grand River Community Health Center. Welcome to Module 1. Here is your table of contents, the definition of Doctrine of Discovery, the role of church and state, systemic approach to colonization. So first of all, we have to define the Doctrine of Discovery. It's been around for quite some time, and this is a comprehensive definition I found here from the Assembly of First Nations, and this is the most recent thing that I could find as well, January 2018. So the basic tenet of the Doctrine of Discovery is that it stems from the Pope, okay? A series of papal bulls, which are formal statements from the Pope, originating as far back as the 1400s. And it was used as legal and moral justification for colonial dispossession of sovereign Indigenous nations. So we're going back to the original time of those connections with two different people that are coming together from different cultures, so including First Nations in what is now Canada. During the European Age of Discovery, Christian explorers claimed lands for their monarchs who felt they could exploit the land regardless of the original inhabitants. So that's a lot to take in and understand. So let's break it down a bit. What does that actually mean in relationship to what we want to know and understand it for? So legal and moral justification. Legal means that it was ratified by the ruling power of the church and state. And that's important to know. Later on you'll watch a video by John Mohawk, and he explains that a little bit more about how important that ruling power was of the church and state and how it stratified that particular society in terms of a hierarchy. Moral. The church created all social mores and cultural norms of the time. That particular society really was ruled by the church. So if something like that were to come forward, then that was considered to be the law, and you were tortured or killed if you went against what the church was saying. So it was very much the system of hierarchy, right? So legal and moral justification. So that church is putting out this statement to say that it's okay to inherit or to claim these lands according to the church. And whose culture is that viewed from? The question there, and the answer is Eurocentric, right? Because we have two different cultures coming together in that time of colonization and discovery. So they're bringing in that European point of view, and it's only focused on that particular point of view, and they're coming in and finding something that's very foreign to them. So here we have next, colonial dispossession of sovereign nations. That's a big statement there. So let's break that down a little bit. So colonial dispossession, meaning that you have this separate entity and colony coming in, and they don't recognize or realize that they were already people living on this land. This land was already inhabited. Not only that, but the people that were there, they were civilizations already, right? They existed independently of this European colony coming over. And because they were civilizations, they had their own economies, their trade systems that they worked out with other nations, family structures, social and political structures. So we were indeed civilizations. None of this was acknowledged in favor of personal gain. Okay, so that personal gain is where that dispossession comes in, and that colony has determined that they have the right to conquer. Right? So here we have Oren Lyons. Oren's very well known for being an advocate for our Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and he's been active in international Indigenous rights, has been going to United Nations for many years, and I believe he works at SUNY, if he's still over there, at State University. I'm not sure if he is, but I know he did at one point work there, as well as doing many international speaking engagements, and he's a knowledge keeper as well. So we're just going to watch that video of him, and he's going to explain that a little bit more. Next we have John Mohawk. I really wanted to include some of our strong Indigenous knowledge keepers, as well as a scholar. John Mohawk, in my opinion, was quite unique because he had that traditional knowledge, and he spent a lifetime of going around and really learning from our elders and learning that oral tradition. That's the way that he grew up, in addition to becoming an academic scholar. So he has that PhD, and he was over at State University at Buffalo. So yeah, he was just an amazing person to listen to, and he had quite a bit of knowledge. So you can go ahead and read his bio there. One of the most interesting things I found about John Mohawk was that he was a founder and director of the Iroquois White Corn Project in the Pine Woods Cafe, and that's out in Cattaraugus. And really it was about beginning to decolonize our diets and to really get back to that original way of thinking and being in that connection with our food. So this little video is going to talk to you about that history of European society and how it impacted that connection that we had with the European settlers. So the role of church and state. Church can be seen, again, as I mentioned, as the ruling authority. There's a lack of accountability for behaviors and attitudes when this is set up. This doctrine of discovery, this papal bull comes through, the Pope puts out these statements, and so it more or less becomes, as long as we're serving what this Pope is saying to us, we don't really need to look at our behaviors and be accountable for them, and we don't need to look at our attitudes as long as we're following this, and we don't need to question if that's right or wrong, because who would question God, right? It's that psychological connection of control that the church deems over their society, that this has to be true because it's coming from God. So the state is closely linked to the church. The church set up the precedent for early explorers to claim lands in the name of their country. So it's really kind of getting into dangerous territory as time goes on, and more settlers are coming over to our territories all over Canada and the States, and it just really sets up that dangerous precedent that this is how we are able to treat the people that we come in contact with, that we have no rights and that we're not really seen as human. Again, this is from the Assembly of First Nations, January 2018. Discovery was used as a tool to attempt the exclusive power to extinguish Indigenous rights on an ongoing basis. The pre-existing inherent sovereignty of Indigenous people was not considered. Again, with that early relationship with the first settlers and that inclusion of church and state, it really sets up that precedent that, you know, these people don't have any rights, and they just really did not acknowledge that we were sovereign, that we were existing prior to any contact, and that we did have these civilizations. That's completely ignored. And like this quote says, that sovereignty was not considered at all. Many times we are reduced to stereotypes when we're looking at Indigenous people, because we have multiple barriers and there are a whole list of concurrent disorders that we're facing. You know, it's not just one thing, it's many, many things. Anytime you take a course or, you know, do some research, all you have to do is find the chart that has the statistics on Indigenous people. We have the highest of many, many things, many social ills, right? Those are all can be linked directly back to residential schools and the intergenerational effects. So a lot of that's negative, right? And if you're beginning to study and beginning to learn and educate yourself, that a lot of times that's all that you really see or hear about are these negative effects. And that's completely true. I mean, they're all valid. I want it to really hit home with that. The other side of that coin is that intergenerational impacts has forced people to begin to heal, to become resilient, to begin to decolonize, to take things back and reclaim our culture, our language, our connection to the land, because we lost all of those. You know, we were dispossessed of all of that in residential school as well as in colonization. So these are the positive things that intergenerational impacts has forced us to do to begin to heal and break some of those cycles. We'll talk more about this later on as well. So how was the Doctrine of Discovery a systemic approach to colonization? The number one thing I would have to say is that Eurocentric views really created an us versus them mentality. Like, it set folks up to really buy into that mindset of a hierarchy, right? Which was, again, pretty dangerous. The church followed up with that by justifying and perpetuating the Doctrine of Discovery. They, meaning Indigenous people, were less than human, and therefore they were justified in doing the things that they did to state claim to the land, to the resources, right? Dehumanization allowed for complete conquering of resources, land, culture, and language by an outside dominant state. Church and government continued with genocidal policies throughout history. So again, it's that dangerous cycle with that diagram, is that wheel keeps going around and around within society and that hierarchy, and the folks that are in charge are often very much influencing these genocidal policies that, you know, are happening. So here's your homework. Brainstorm what systems have been involved in the colonization process, historical and contemporary. What benefits does this have, if any? Are there any significant changes you feel can be made? Compare your answers with your colleagues. So that's pretty detailed. That's something that you can do on your own time and in discussions. Again, any kind of dialogue that you can have with each other, particularly if you have folks that are watching this in groups. This is a great way to just stop this video now, have this discussion, and really break it down, particularly the benefits. What benefits does this have, if any? If you want to think about things such as privilege, that's a really contemporary thing that exists within our society, and that is definitely a benefit. Any significant changes, you can really get as simple with this as you want to, or as complex. Significant changes on my end, I feel, would be the changes that we need to make within the systems and how we can relate better and make things to be more inclusive for all folks. Okay, so those are my questions that we have, historical and contemporary, what systems have been involved in colonization. So now if you're listening, this is a little bit about me as well, my contact information. I'm at mthomas@grchc.ca. We are over on Colburn Street, and that's my phone number there if you need to contact me for anything. The services available that I provide are cultural safety training such as this, and with that, I really work to tailor to meet the needs of your organization, whether it's training within your staff, volunteers, management, or board. We can work together to develop something that's going to best suit you. I offer support to individuals pertaining to Indigenous issues, such as anyone that has a particular case that they are working on where they are trying to support an Indigenous person and they really need that guidance and that connection to, maybe they need some support people, some more additional resources, some knowledge keepers that can really help to gain support and advocacy for their client. Or if you are an Indigenous person, maybe living in Brantford, new to Brantford, just arriving here from another community, and you really need to have that connection to, you know, our local Indigenous community, being Six Nations or New Credit, I can help to connect you with some individuals to support you as well. Another aspect of what I do is education. We will be hosting 3 conferences in the upcoming calendar year. We have one set for October 25th. That's going to be Truth and Reconciliation Commission and youth engagement. So we're going to be looking at some of those recommendations and getting youth involved, really just engaging them to think about some of those aspects of the TRC. January 31st, we're going to be doing a conference on colonization. In March, I don't have I'm working with a partner on this one. I'm working with Laurier, so we don't have the date set yet for that one, but it'll be intergenerational impacts and beyond. So again, throughout the year, I'm required to do these pieces that, again, are bridging those gaps and helping to create better relationships between Indigenous folks and others that are wanting to make life a little bit better. Now, if you're listening, and take care.